What happens when the country that once feared too many people begins to fear too few? For most of the 20th century, China was a warning. A vast nation with too many mouths to feed and too little land to feed them. Famines scarred its memory. Crowded cities and hungry villages defined its image abroad. To many of its leaders, population was not a blessing. It was a threat to stability, a threat to development, a threat to the dream of national revival. So in the late 1970s, China made a historic decision. It would do something no civilization had ever tried on such a scale. It would engineer the size of its own future. In the year 1979, the one-child policy was launched. Urban couples were told to have only one child. Propaganda posters covered village walls. Smiling families of 3 under bright red slogans. Have fewer children. Live a better life. Behind the slogans, there were also fines, forced abortions, and stories too painful for many families to tell aloud. At the time, the policy seemed harsh, but also modern, scientific, rational. Many economists today still argue that it worked. On its original terms, birth rates fell fast. Families became smaller. Household savings rose. Women poured into factories and offices. A tidal wave of young workers surged into new industrial zones. They stitched the world's clothes, assembled its electronics, and built the concrete skeletons of rising megacities. China became the world's workshop, and the phrase demographic dividend entered the vocabulary of global economics. Because there were so many workers and relatively few children or elderly to support, each paycheck could stretch further. The country grew richer, faster than almost anyone expected. But hidden inside the success was a new kind of danger. The math of demography is slow, patient, and relentless. When you cut births sharply, you do not feel the full impact. In 5 years, or even in 10, you feel it. A generation later, all across China, a new family shape appeared. 4 grandparents, 2 parents, 1 child, 1 small pair of shoulders, carrying the weight of an entire family tree. In many regions, especially in the countryside, sons were preferred to daughters. Ultrasound machines and deep-rooted traditions combined into a quiet revolution. Millions of girls were never born. By the turn of the century, China had one of the most skewed sex ratios on Earth. Entire cohorts of young men grew up knowing they might never find a partner. At the same time, the total number of children kept falling. Kindergartens closed or merged. Rural primary schools, once overflowing, saw their classes shrink. But on the surface, the cities still boomed. Shenzhen, Shanghai, Guangzhou, their skylines climbed higher. Apartment prices soared. Subways tunneled outward like steel roots. It was easy to believe that growth could go on forever, until the age pyramid started to flip. Today, China faces a demographic reversal, unlike anything in its history. The country that once feared baby booms now fears a baby bust. Birth rates are far below the level needed to replace the population. In many cities, young couples delay marriage or skip it entirely. They look at the cost of housing, of education, of caring for aging parents, and they ask, quietly but firmly, do we really want children? In a life like this, the government has noticed, over the past decade, policies that once punished extra births have been dismantled. The one-child policy became a 2-child policy, then a 3-child policy. Subsidies appeared, tax breaks, longer maternity leave, and promises of more affordable childcare. The message from Beijing has flipped completely. Have more children for your family. and for the nation. But culture and economics are not light switches. You cannot simply reverse decades of social change with a new slogan. An entire generation grew up as only children. They invested in education, in careers, in personal freedom. For many of them, one child feels like enough, and no child sometimes feels like liberation. Meanwhile, the population is aging fast. In city parks at dawn, you see lines of retirees practicing Tai Chi, their movements slow and synchronized. In countryside villages, you see grandparents living alone, their adult children gone to the cities, their grandchildren often living far away. Hospitals are filling with chronic illnesses of old age, not just the infections of poverty. Pension funds strain under the weight of tens of millions of new retirees. Factories face a different problem. The once endless supply of young migrant workers is drying up. Wages are rising, and not only because of growth. Simply put, there are fewer young people to hire. Robots assemble cars and electronics where human hands once stood shoulder to shoulder. Automation is not just a choice, it is a survival strategy. The world has seen aging societies before. Japan, South Korea, many countries in Europe. But China is different in one crucial way. Those countries became old after they became rich. China, by many measures, is growing old. Before it is fully rich, millions have left poverty behind, but millions more live on fragile incomes, supporting a vast elderly population with a still developing welfare state is a daunting task. So Beijing experiments raising the retirement age, encouraging older workers to stay on the job, trying to build a more generous pension system and a nationwide safety net, investing in education and technology, hoping that a smaller workforce can still be productive enough to keep the economy growing. Demography is not destiny, but it sets the boundaries of what is possible. China can adapt, and it is trying. What it cannot easily do is turn back the clock on births that never happened. There is no quick fix for missing generations. And yet, inside this story, there is something universal. Around the world, from Europe to East Asia to parts of the Middle East, people are choosing to have fewer children as their societies grow wealthier, more urban, more educated. China has moved through this transition at breathtaking speed, from a land of crowded villages to a nation of high-rise apartments. In a single lifetime, the one-child policy did not start that journey, but it accelerated it, and it shaped it in uniquely painful ways. When historians look back at the rise of 21st century China, they will not only see skyscrapers, high-speed rail, and export statistics. They will also see a quieter revolution, the shrinking classroom, the only child with 4 elderly relatives watching every step. They will see a country that tried to solve one problem of numbers and created another. A country that once believed it was too crowded, now wondering who will care for the old, who will build the future. When there are fewer young hands to hold it, the answer to those questions is still unwritten. But one thing is already clear: the most populous nation on earth is entering a new chapter, not defined by how many people it has, but by how it cares for and depends upon the people it has left